You know how I think most people know about God? I think it's through movies and TV, which is unfortunate because really the only true way to know God is by learning about Him through His Scripture. That's where He tells His story, and it's not somebody else telling His story. But, a lot of movies and a lot of TV shows, they do a pretty decent job of depicting some things that God did and some things God said and stuff like that. Probably the most famous of all the stories about God that got put into some sort of multimedia is the Ten Commandments, right? So for a lot of you, Moses is Charleston Heston. And you don't even know who Moses is, but you know Charleston Heston, and you saw that story when you were a kid and probably still watch it sometimes and are just kind of amazed that it was as good of a movie as it was for when it was released. But that story isn't just famous to Americans who think Charleston Heston is Moses. The story of the Ten Commandments, and backing up a little bit, the deliverance of Israel through the Red Sea, and backing that up a little bit to the story of the 10 plagues in Egypt, that was one of the most famous stories in the ancient world. After Israel was delivered, and for those of you who don't know the story, Israel was in bondage and captivity and slavery in Egypt. They cried out to God, who was faithful and heard their cry, and He sent Moses to perform these plagues to show Pharaoh that there is only one true God, and that Israel was His people. After 10 plagues actually, Pharaoh let Israel go. He let his whole nation of slaves go. They went through the Red Sea on dry ground. The seas parted and they walked through. And then Pharaoh and his army chased them, but the water drowned them. And God delivered His people. And it was this great victory and this amazing thing. And for centuries, people talked about it. People in the lands around were afraid of Israel because they knew their God. They knew that their God was powerful. They knew that He was a God who was faithful to His people. And they didn't want anything to do with Him. That's the same God that we serve. That's the same God who we're trying to know. It's the God who saves His people. I don't know what sins you're drowning in right now. Maybe it's the sin of lust or pride or the way you use your tongue or laziness or selfishness or jealousy or fill in the blank, lying, I don't know what it is, stealing, whatever stuff you have going on. It enslaves you, it captures you, and you can't get free. There's only one source of salvation, and that's God. Now sometimes we start to come to know God better and we start escaping, we start getting out of our problems, and we think this is great, and then you hit a wall, and you freak out, and you think, what? I thought God was going to save me. I thought everything was going to be good, and now it's just as bad, if not worse, than it was before. I don't know if I can truly escape. I don't know if the Lord can really save me. Do you know Israel had that same question? They had the same exact question. They were delivered out of Egypt, and they were brought to the edge of the Red Sea. Now Pharaoh and his army were in hot pursuit. And the people crowd to Moses. They say, what are you doing? You brought us out here to die. We were fine back in Egypt, but now you've brought us out here to die, and we're going to die as we try to escape to freedom. But in Exodus chapter 14, as the people had the Red Sea at their front and Pharaoh's army, Pharaoh was, by the way, the greatest military at that time, he and his army was. But in Exodus chapter 14, Moses speaks to the people, and he says in Exodus 14 and verse 13, fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which He will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. God is the one who saves, and you need to see that. And Israel did. Now, by the way, they still had to obey God. They still had to walk through the Red Sea and do all that. But it was God's power who saved them. And the same is true today. You need to trust in God. He's the one who will save you. And when He tells you to walk through the sea, walk through the sea. When He tells you to stop, stop. When He tells you to go, go. Do what God has said and let Him bring about His great salvation in your life so that you can know that the Lord is your rock and your salvation. And so that will inspire you to keep reaching upward together toward heaven.